music works. How does the written language of music work here? Let's check it out. What I have for us here is a blank piece of piano music, blank sheet of piano music. And the way written music works, you can see here that what we have is these lines and spaces. Lines and spaces as we go down. This is called a musical staff. A musical staff. You can see we have, in the case of piano, we have two musical staffs happening that are joined together over here by this bracket. So the way these two staffs are joined together, that's how we know that we are looking at piano music for two hands and two staffs. But not all instruments work that way. In fact, some instruments read on just one clef, just one singular staff at a time. The way these lines and spaces work is that each one of these lines and spaces is a different letter, represents a different letter in the musical alphabet. And so as we go up a staff, as we ascend on the page, we also go up through the musical alphabet. Our musical alphabet has the letters A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And with the musical alphabet, once we get to G, so as we're ascending, you can see we have more lines and spaces here than we do have letters. And so as we move up, once we get to G in our musical alphabet here, we just loop right back around to A. So A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And then we just start back over again at A and continue on. So we can tell these letters to be in any arrangement that we like on the musical staff. They always ascend, they always move sequentially, but we can assign, we can say they begin anywhere we want on this musical staff. And that's what these clefs are about over here. These symbols are called musical clefs. Here we have probably the two most common musical clefs. The top one here is called the treble clef, and the bottom one is called the bass clef. These have other names as well, two other main names for the treble clef and our bass clef, and those names reflect what letters these clefs are going to assign to our lines and spaces here. So the other name for the treble clef is the G clef. The G clef. And you can almost see with the shape of this clef, it's almost like a stylized letter G. And if we're thinking of this as kind of a fancy stylized letter G over here, you'll notice that the bottom spiral, that spiral that comes in right where the bottom part of the G is, that spiral is circling around a particular line. It all spirals and centers on that one particular line there. The second line from the bottom. Do you see that? How it kind of makes like a little circle and crosshairs there over the second line from the bottom. That line that it's circling is the note G. So when we put a treble clef, at the beginning of our sheet music like this, what we're doing, if we write that symbol there at the beginning of our musical staff, if we write that clef, what we're doing is saying that line, we want the notes on this musical staff to be arranged so that that line, the note that this treble clef circles, is the note G. And so if that line right there is the note G, we put a note on that. So our musical notation symbols are circles. Start with circles, and we can kind of add to that circle. We can fill it in, do a lot of different things with this circle here. But we're going to start for our musical notation with just a circle. And our fancy musical name for just a circle by itself is called a whole note. A whole note. So I've put a whole note here on the letter G, on the line G. Because that's what my treble clef is telling me the lines and spaces on my musical staff are going to be. So if that second from the bottom line there is G, then I can descend from that point, can descend down. And so that means the space just below that whole note is an F, would be the note F. And then that line is the letter G, which means the next space above. So we're just going one letter at a time and going one line or space at a time, moving exactly sequentially up the musical staff, up or down, and that determines which way we move through our alphabet here. So if I go to the next space above that G, it's going to be the letter A. And then the line above that note will be B. We continue that, so on and so forth, through our spaces and lines ascending. So we had F on the bottom space, and then G on the line above that, then A, B, C, D, E, a staff. And think of that top space. The space here above that staff is also being the letter G. So we ascended through our staff here. And now we know that when I see a note on that space right here, that second space from the bottom, it's the note A. When I see a note on the line above that, it's the letter B. If I see a note written on this space, it's the note C, D on that line, E on this space, F on that line, and then G on the space above that. And we were also able to descend. We went from G, again because that's what our treble clef is telling us that note is. Went down, we descend through the alphabet. There's G, F. The bottom line on our treble clef here is E. And then D, right there. D on that first space below. So that's how our notes would be organized if we put a treble clef like this, right, at the beginning of our musical staff. That's what that treble clef tells us the notes on the musical staff are going to be. The treble clef. Sometimes in school, when they do like a brief overview of music, they'll use acronyms to help remember some of these, or use patterns, pattern recognition, to try to help memorize the way a treble clef musical staff works. You'll notice that the spaces spell the word F-A-C-E. So ascending through the spaces here on my treble clef spells the word face. Spells out the word face, F-A-C-E, moving up through that staff like we just saw. And that's, that's a fair way to memorize that for like taking a flashcard test or something like that. But understanding the system here, understanding what the rules are that are governing why the letters F-A-C-E fall on those spaces, that really gives us a far greater and more working knowledge and understanding of what's going on musically here. Because the spatial reasoning that we use for our written musical language, that as we go up and ascend through the alphabet, our notes also get higher and higher in frequency, meaning that they go from low pitches to relatively high pitches. And that's as we move from low to high through the staff. We can keep that same process. We can repeat that same process here with a different staff. Let's try it with a different clef. So in piano music, we always have two staffs next to each other like this. And the most common arrangement for those in piano music is for this staff, the staff on the bottom, to use the bass clef, bass clef. So we have treble clef and bass clef. Shows you some of the versatility of the piano, and that it has this tremendous register, can cover all of these notes. You're able to play all these different notes. In fact, there are 88 keys at a piano. Each one of those keys, each one of the white keys that is a whole letter. So at the piano, each one of the white keys is a whole alphabet letter, either an A, a B, a C, a D, an E, an F, or a G. And so we can move all of those up across the bass clef and treble clef, cover a huge distance. For example, a bass, the bass, an upright bass in the orchestra just reads on the bass clef here, just covers notes on the bass clef. So this is also called F clef. And given what we know about treble clef's other name, that it's a G clef, we may be able to deduce that there is another name indeed for our friend the bass clef here. It is also called the F clef, the F clef. And it's sort of like a stylized F too, yeah. So yeah, check it out. The letter F there, and then a stylized F, kind of using what looks like almost the number 7 with the line through it. That's how my dad always wrote F's out in the world. F. The letter F. And our symbol here for the bass clef, or F clef, F clef, F clef, sort of looks like our stylized F over here. And just like our G clef, just like our treble clef, it's telling us what note is on a specific one of these lines or spaces here on the staff, on our musical staff. And in this case, you'll notice these 2 dots. See those 2 dots there? And we sort of have this corkscrew thing happening. Again, up at the top, kind of like at the bottom of our treble clef. Have our corkscrew kind of thing happening here. And then there's those 2 dots, and you may notice that it's all happening around a single line. All of that centering around a single line on our staff there, just like our treble clef was. And that line, that's a symbol, is centering on, is the letter F. So that line on the bottom staff now, we know that that line is the letter F. And so we can repeat this same process here of ascending and descending through the staff alphabetically, just like we did for our treble clef. We can do that with our bass clef here, our F clef as well. And so, if this is the letter F on that line, then if we ascend from there, the next space up, that next space up above that line is going to be the letter G. That's right. And we can continue up from that space as well. So the next line would be A. And then the stop space right here would be B. And we can go down from our letter F as well, from our line F. And that would make this space E. And then this line D. C. B. A. And that bottom line on our bass clef, that very bottom line, is G. And then F, that space below. So now we've repeated our same lettering process based off of what our clef told us. Our F clef told us that line right there is the letter F. And so we can move up and down through these staffs to figure out the rest of the letters that occur on the lines and spaces. So this very bottom space in the bass clef is A. There's an F down here. We can kind of think of that F coming off of the staff. G for the bottom line. A, B, C, D, E. F is that line right there for our staff and for our clef. And then G is that space. A, that line. And then B right here on the space above that. So our treble clef and our bass clef, our G clef, telling us that line right there is G, and our F clef, telling us that line right there is F. And you may notice on piano music in particular here, where the treble clef is stacked on top of the bass clef. So we're working with these two clefs next to each other. In our bass clef, we were able to walk up and find that space right there was the letter B. That space above the clef was the letter B. And as we walked down here through the treble clef staff, we found that the bottom space was the letter D, was the note D. So this first space above the bass clef is the letter B, and that first space below the treble clef is the letter D. Well, there's only one letter left there in between those two, and that letter C. And we can even write in our own line like that. And lines that you write in yourself above or below the staff are called ledger lines. So we can write in our own ledger lines like that. And there is one ledger line, this first hypothetical ledger line here, the first line that we would write above the bass clef, the first ledger line that we would write below the treble clef, that line right there is, you guessed it, our letter C. That's that one letter that we had left. The one letter that we had left there between B and D to get us. And sure enough, that C that lives right there, that C that lives right there on that middle line, that middle C, is also called middle C. We refer to middle C as a reference point, really common reference point in music, in musical arrangement, and orchestration, and how things are kind of arrayed in the musical world. You'll hear that term, middle C. You'll hear that term, middle C, out there. And that's what they're telling us, is that note right there in the middle of the treble clef and bass clef that lives right between these on the ledger line that's right between both is middle C. That's where middle C comes from. We use middle C at the piano. It's kind of the middlemost C. It's the centermost C, that white key at the middle of the keyboard. And that is how lettering and our musical alphabet and the written language of music. How the written language of music works. We have a musical staff that's lines and spaces. We can assign what letters each one of those lines and spaces represents using a musical clef. Today we saw the two clefs most common in piano music especially, and in most music, the treble clef and the bass clef. Treble clef and bass clef. Those clefs tell us what the notes are here on our staff. The G clef, and the F clef. That got us all of our letters ascending and descending through the bass clef, through the treble clef staff. So through these two staffs, now we know what letters are on each one of those. And so we can write notes on those staffs now. Those notes will tell us which letter on our musical instrument it is that we play. For the piano, that means one of the keys on the piano. We're going to play one of the keys. If we think about a piano here, I have low notes over here and high notes over here, and that corresponds directly to my sheet music. As I go up on my sheet music, I go up the piano to higher and higher notes. And as we descend on our sheet music, the notes are lower and lower and lower on our piano. Y'all, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Hope you enjoyed discovering how the musical alphabet works and how we use that musical alphabet together with staff, lines, and clefs to arrange notes and tell instruments which notes, which letters to play. Let's love y'all. Small arms, big hugs. We'll see you next time.